Patricia. Um, Welcome, everyone. I'm James Poviwa, Chair of the Sustainable Economy Advisory Council, and this is the August 27th, 2024 regular meeting of the Sustainable Economy Advisory Council. I am going to go ahead and do roll call. James Poviwa, me, I am here. Daisy Maldonado is excused. Patricia Knighton is
I'm
present.
here. Sorry.
Yes, thank you. Um, Glenn Schiffbauer,
Here.
thank you. Rob Black, Cassie Arias, Jonathan Perry,
Present.
thank you. Mayani Barudin,
Present.
thank you. Atsa Chavez is possibly arriving late, but is otherwise excused. Wendy Atsity,
Present.
thank you. Janine Yazim, Joseph Little,
Present.
thank you. Marissa Naranjo, great. What is our tally?
Seven.
Count 1, 2. Excellent. Thank you. So we do have a quorum, and we'll move on to the rest of our agenda, which was posted through public notice and also provided to council members. And I know that it is up on the screen now. Today, we will approve meeting minutes from August 15th, a special meeting that we hosted earlier this month. We will go through a discussion of the statewide strategic plan, which includes reviewing formats for input into the state plan. And then we're going to have a presentation on this month's selected target sectors, which include sustainable and green energy. And we're excited to have both our Economic Development Department and MNERD presenting. And we'll lead into an open discussion of other inputs on the state plan for the Advisory Council. We'll move on to general updates, updates from the Advisory Council working groups, updates from our Just Transition Advisor and Chair of the Task Force, Kayla Lucero Matucci. We'll move into public comment and vote to adjourn. Can I get a motion to approve the agenda?
So move.
Thank you,
I'll
Joe.
second.
Thank you, Patricia. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you. Now we're going to review our minute notes from August 15th. And those minutes were provided to the council prior to the meeting, and I know we can put them up on screen as well. So I'll give everybody a moment to review. Thank you. And if folks have had enough time to review, can I get a motion to approve our minutes from August 15th?
Move to approve minutes.
Thank you,
I'll
Glenn.
second. Yep.
Thank you, Patricia. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Aye.
Aye.
Excellent. Thank you. So yeah, moving on to a discussion of our statewide strategic plan. I will pass it to Chair Lucero Matusi. I am always reluctant because I sometimes put the Matusi before the Lucero.
Okay. Thank you, James. Chair Kobiwa. So we're going to have a presentation today from our colleagues at the Energy, Minerals, and Natural Resources Department, and then also a presentation from EDD. But first, it might be worth just saying a bit about the structure of these meetings. Most of you have been here, but we've been reviewing target sectors and seeking recommendations from the Advisory Council on the target sectors. We're very excited that so many of you have expertise in this particular target sector, which in the plan is called Sustainable and Green Energy. We're excited that a lot of our council members have expertise on energy development and renewable energy development in particular. And so that's one of the reasons that we had an odd number of target sectors, and we wanted to make sure that we left enough time to get your input and knowledge. So yeah, our council has had access to briefing binders, which is just the collated material on each target sector from the previous versions of the plan. And so you have that in your Google Drive, but I know that a lot of you have deep background in this, like I said. So we want to make sure that we leave time for discussion. But we're lucky to have with us Sammy Cow from MNerd. And so I will hand it over to Sammy and share my screen to allow her slides to be visible to you. And just bear with me while I do that.
I'll also just say it's great to see you, Sammy, and congratulations on joining MNerd as the policy director for the department.
Thank you, James. I appreciate that.
Thank you, Sammy, for being here with us. All right, can you guys see that?
Yeah, I can. Can we just go to the very first slide, please? Okay. Well, thank you, everyone. It's really great to see all these familiar faces and names, both here and the attendees. Like James said, my name is Sammy Cow, and I've recently been appointed as a policy director here at MNerd. And as many of you know, I'm not the only new addition here at the department. Our secretary, Melanie Kenderdine, was appointed by Governor Michelle Lujan Grisham earlier this summer. And for today, I'd like to give a brief, pretty broad overview of the vision that Secretary Kenderdine and MNerd have for renewable energy and the transition to net zero here in our state.
Sorry to interrupt you, Patricia.
Yeah, I'm just, I don't know if anyone else is having a little bit of, I can hear you fine, James, but Kayla and Sammy, I'm maybe speak up a little. I've got my volume all the way and I'm having a harder time hearing you.
Okay, yeah, is this better?
It is better, thank you.
Okay. So on this slide, Kayla, if you could do like 2 animations ahead. I know that I don't need to press the importance of addressing the climate crisis to this group of people, but to set the stage, here's a very local example of just how extreme the climate crisis is right here at home. Kayla, could you go 1 more back? Thank you. Here is a NASA satellite photo of Elephant Butte in 1994. And you will see the contrast of what it looked like here in 2013. Next slide, please. Here is just another photo that shows how much the water level has dropped at Elephant Butte, and it's undoubtedly because temperatures have increased significantly over the last few decades. The average is about 0.9 degrees Celsius. And this really shows a very urgent need to decarbonize, and the time to act is now. And here at MNerd, we're focusing on not just the net zero by 2050 goal, We're also making sure that all the intermediate necessary steps are also taken. We need thoughtfully sequenced policies to ensure that we have actionable steps with technologies currently available to us during this transition and as we wait for new technologies to be developed. Next slide, please. Kayla, if you wouldn't mind just doing all the animations to the end, that'd be great. Thank you. So in this slide, we're just covering one very crucial element out of many that we need to address if we are going to reach net zero by 2050. In the center here, you'll see a map of the United States from 2016 with all of the high voltage transmission lines that we have across the country. And in 2016, there were about 160,000 miles of high voltage transmission lines across the country. And a report from Princeton Net Zero America has shown that the US will need a 75% increase in transmission capacity by 2030. So roughly that's going to be an additional 120,000 miles. If we're to assume that 60% of that capacity is to be achieved by adding more mileage of transmission lines, this means we're going to need 72,000 new miles of high voltage transmission lines by 2030. So today we see a range of 5 to 5.6 towers per mile. So if we're going to do some quick math, that gives you 360,000 towers by 2030. And different entities have done similar calculations and the number varies, but the end message is the same, that we need a lot of infrastructure build out if we're going to be net zero by 2050. Go ahead, Kayla. Oh, it's okay. Thank you. The transmission towers that we are talking about, they are made of steel, aluminum, copper, and other critical minerals. And that applies to wind turbines, cell phone towers, electric vehicles, and the accompanying charging stations, as well as solar panels. So all things that are really important that we will need to achieve net zero. Slide 3, please, Kayla. So when we look at all this information and put it into context of our state, we all know that New Mexico is highly ranked in our wind and solar energy potential, and we are certainly looking to leverage that potential to our benefit. I think there's like 2 animations in this slide, Kayla, that just illustrate, how awesome we are at wind and solar. Next slide, please. Same thing here, Kayla, if you could just do all the animations to the end. So to fully realize our potential in the renewable energy market, we need to look at how we are going to build out the infrastructure that is necessary, what the required materials are, and what the current technology allows for. So before I move on, I want to make a really clear distinction here, and that is a difference between energy for power generation and then energy for industrial uses and purposes. In terms of power generation, there are significantly less obstacles in going fully renewable. We have the resources and the technology to generate clean energy from solar and wind. And we're all familiar with the ETA that commits our state to produce 100% clean electricity by 2045. The story is a little bit different for industrial purposes. Sorry. Here in this graph, these are just a list of energy intensive industries, AKA hard to decarbonize industries. And I like for you all to take a closer look at the figures for aluminum, iron and steel, and glass. All these are essential to building the high voltage transmission towers, cell towers, EVs, solar panels, etc. And you'll see here that the bulk of these use a significant amount of natural gas. You'll see that in the blue, and that the electricity and the renewable energy in those are the yellow and the gray in the graph. They're just not as substantial in the usage as we would like them to be for industrial purposes. Next slide, Kayla, please. And the reason for that is renewables and electricity are just not sufficient fuels to create these materials. Kayla, could you do the animations, please? Thank you. To build out these materials that we are going to need, we need fuels that will generate temperatures of 300 to 2800 degrees Celsius. Now, at this point in time, we just don't have the technology in wind, solar, or electrifying that will help us reach these temperatures. And while there are some developing technologies that are coming close to achieving these high temps in a laboratory setting, there is not available at commercial scale, nor are they economically viable yet. So in summary, MNERD's vision for New Mexico is that we want to be an essential hub in the transition away from fossil fuels, and we have all the potential to achieve that. But we need to keep in mind sequences of policies that are necessary to achieve net zero. And the reality of the current situation is that we still rely pretty heavily on natural gas for many industrial uses. And since we know that natural gas does emit a significant amount of greenhouse gas emissions, in our view, that poses a strong argument for responsible hydrogen development, which has been shown to generate those high temperatures that I mentioned earlier. As well, we need carbon capture and sequestration as an intermediate technology during this transition to meet net zero. I feel like all the things I talked about today in terms of like the minerals that we need, that we have here that are ready to mine. We have the natural gas available, and we have of course, all the solar, wind, and geothermal resources that we can get off the ground for power generation. We just need to kind of sequence all these things in a way to set up New Mexico in a way where we all win. And that is it for me. Thank you.
Thank you, Sammy. Appreciate it. And I will open it up to opening up to any questions from council members. And I think we can also, given our smaller council today, open it to public if there are folks that have questions in the audience. So Patricia.
Thank you so much, Sammy. That was really insightful. And it occurred to me, probably because of the sector that I work in, which is new technology research being converted and have for many, many years. It occurs to me that some very specific technology challenges, and you highlighted a couple, but there's probably a way to break those down and say, we need new plastics, we need new sources of this and that. But we do live in a research-heavy state, the state of innovation, and I wonder if that list of technology challenges is really out there for the people that are trying really hard to find solutions to all manner of things.
We certainly aren't ruling out or precluding that all these really great startups and renewable energy developers will be able to build out and develop these technologies that we need. That will be available at commercial scale and are also economically viable. These things that we're talking about, I understand it's probably a weird shift from my previous position at CBNM in terms of like the content I'm talking about today, but I see this as, we have from now until 2050 to reach net zero. And right now, the reality is that the technology that we have just does not get us there if we don't rely on things that we already have to build out the infrastructure that is absolutely necessary to get to net zero. So yeah, definitely not ruling out possibilities of new technology innovations. This is kind of just our analysis from, what the reality is today.
Yeah, I mean, it kind of comes down to can solutions be deployed in time, and what are the timelines for those needs, and how do they get stacked? It's a fairly, it's not a trivial thing to put out to the public, but it seems like that call to action, you articulated it very well, and I just really hope, so I applaud you and hope that we can get that word out to people that are doing development with 2 DOE labs right in our state and all the space work that's going on. I mean, there's questions about, you know, there's people trying to develop space technologies, and then there's the controversies. It's probably too late for certain things. You got to focus on the timeline to deploy those. And 2050 is really not that far away when it comes to new technology. So pretty interesting.
Yeah. Our secretary is she puts a large emphasis on what she calls like thoughtful sequencing policy. So I think that lines up with what exactly you're talking about. So I appreciate that. Thank you.
Glenn?
Right. Thanks for the presentation, Sammy, and congratulations. I was not aware of this move. I'm
Thank
happy
you.
to have you at MNerd. Quick question about the industrial energy usage. My note taking was rather slow on that slide, but I was just wondering if the energy consumption, because each of those listed on that slide have different varying amounts of water usage in their processes. And I'm wondering if the energy required in order to supply that water, which is sort of an external energy amount, is calculated into any of those or into that whole graph.
That's actually a good question. I'm not entirely sure. This slide was actually prepared by the secretary, and she has been presenting it in various arenas, I guess, to kind of give her broad overview of what her goals and intentions are here as Secretary of MNerd. There is a source. I'm not sure if on my slide there is a web link that I'd be happy to share with you offline.
That would be great. Thanks.
Of course.
Other questions? Kayla, you're off mute.
I don't have any questions and I don't see any in the audience, but I do have another PowerPoint to share from EDD, and then we could move to a larger discussion.
Great. Let's go ahead and do that. Thank you.
And thank you so much again, Sammy, for being here. If you want to stick around, people may have more questions.
Kayla, I'm having a little trouble hearing you as well.
How about now?
A little better. Thank you.
Okay. Let's see if I can. Is that better?
I think we'll go forward.
Okay.
It's better. Mhm.
All right. Can you see this? Yep. And is it just showing you the first one, or is it showing you my presentation mode?
It's presentation mode. Or maybe it wasn't, but there were some notes. So, okay.
Yeah,
I think
it was showing two slides at once, the next slide. So
Let's see.
where's that screen we want?
Well, I have a PDF, so we'll just do that. Can you see this?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. All right. Okay, well, we wanted to offer a perspective on what's called sustainable and green energy in the statewide plan, with a specific focus today on federal funding opportunities. And so I'll give a bit of background that Sammy already briefly mentioned, and then I'll talk to you about some of the federal funding initiatives that we're excited about. Okay, so just an overview, and and Sammy touched on some of this briefly, but renewable energy is the largest source of New Mexico's total in-state electricity by percentage. In 2023, wind power alone accounted for 38%. These are just some other figures about the breakdown. You can find those on the U.S. Energy Information Administration website, but it's important to note facts such as solar energy supplied almost the remainder of New Mexico's in-state generation when you look at things beyond wind, and it's about 1/5. And all of New Mexico's planned electricity generating capacity additions in 2024 and 2025 are PV or battery storage installations, which is very exciting. Some of the main challenges that I'm sure most of you are familiar with, so I won't talk about these for long, but things like siting, permitting, Sammy talked about transmission. The capital costs of doing projects is one that we're hearing about a lot because, of course, people come to us wanting to fund things. And so we think about a whole range of competitive state and federal grants, tax incentives, and financing mechanisms that they can access. Market entry as well for certain types of technologies, and then grid modernization. But simultaneously, we have opportunities in the form of reduced energy costs, job creation, lower air pollution, and the federal investments that exist at this juncture. And so some strengths include being second in the nation for solar irradiance, sixth in the nation for geothermal energy potential, and also having the 16th most hospitable policy environment for federal investments in things like renewable energy. And thank you, James and NRDC, for that great data. And it's worth noting as well that although New Mexico has 9 target sectors, only one of these is heavily incentivized by massive federal investments at the moment, and that's sustainable and green energy. And there are some other target sectors that do have federal investments, but the scale of this for specifically renewable energy is really unmatched in any other sector. So we see huge potential to attract additional funds to New Mexico. And those are, again, specifically through the Inflation Reduction Act and the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law. And this is a brief that we have shared with all of you. Please contact me if you're interested in receiving a copy of it. We've circulated it to our council. But recently we've been working with some pro bono technical assistance providers, including the State Support Center and S2 Strategies. And so I wanted to really emphasize this resource is available to you, and the experts who crafted it are available to have conversations with you if you have questions about funding a specific project. And for anyone who did not receive this and is not a council member or was not on the big distribution list where I sent this out, please get in touch. We can definitely make sure that you get a copy. So this research comes from a small contract that we were able to pursue with the Rocky Mountain Institute. And I want to share with you a bit of data about the scale of investment that can flow into New Mexico under certain scenarios. So according to information from the Clean Investment Monitor, which is a great tool, and I believe it's free as long as you sign a user agreement, so definitely check it out. But based on data from the Clean Investment Monitor, in 2023 alone, New Mexico's economy received $547 million in federal investments, which was the 3rd largest relative to GDP or population of any state. And this just shows you investments per state as a percentage of GDP in the last 4 quarters. And you can see New Mexico is right here. So according to CBO estimates, New Mexico, and that's data from the CBO, New Mexico stands to see about $5.9 billion in total federal investments under the Inflation Reduction Act from 2023 to 2030. And according to Rocky Mountain Institute analysis, in a net zero scenario where New Mexico takes advantage of tax credits and other incentives, this figure could total more than 8 billion. And so that's about 3,800 per state resident. And this says a bit about investments that the state can attract for different areas. So clean electricity provisions could bring over 3 billion worth of federal funds into the state in a scenario where New Mexico rapidly decarbonizes by 2030. Rapid deployment of electric vehicles and other transportation projects could add 1.2 billion to that calculus. And a build out of clean energy supply chain and other industry and manufacturing infrastructure could see 1.6 billion in investments. This is just to show you a little bit about the composition of the federal legislation and the types of funding that are in these pieces of legislation. And so largely, as you can see, it's comprised of tax credits and loans. And so notably, competitive grants are not the majority of funding through Bill and IRA. And that's not to say that they're not important, but we've been emphasizing the opportunity of tax credits specifically because tax credits are uncapped and non-competitive. And we know that people are spending a lot of their valuable time and resources applying to competitive grants and not always seeing the fruits of that. So we want to highlight that there are other options that are very compelling. And we also recognize that upfront project costs can be a huge barrier. So we want to engage folks in that conversation. And this is to say a little bit about direct pay or what is also referred to as elective pay. So this is a list of eligible types of tax credits, a lot of which are related to renewable energy, storage, some are manufacturing. And so the important thing to underscore about direct pay or elective pay is that previously ineligible entities can claim direct pay. And that includes folks that don't have tax liability, such as local governments. And so if people can find access to financing and funds to sort of front the costs of a project, they can get really compelling incentives back in the form of tax credits. And so we've been hearing stories of, school districts on either coast or public schools collecting multiple millions of dollars back into their budgets for things like solar and storage projects on schools. And for those who can access and utilize this, I think it's a really exciting tool. But going back to this memo that we circulated, this does have mention of options for all types of project sizes. So not everyone is going to be interested in a Department of Energy loan programs office loan through the State Energy Financing Institution or the Tribal Energy loan. People might be more interested in something like the Greenhouse Gas Reduction Fund, which is going to be distributing smaller scale lending through existing lenders and CDFIs. So we recognize that there are opportunities for all sorts of project sizes and types. And we don't want the scale of some of these numbers to feel limiting, because I think there is something for everyone in Bill and IRA. And last but not least, it's important to note that a lot of this can be stacked. So I know that in banking, capital stacking means something different, but in this case, we're talking about tax incentives that can be stacked one upon the other. And so for things like energy communities, which most of New Mexico qualifies as an energy community, under the Inflation Reduction Act, there's an additional 10%. There is an added 10% for projects in low income or tribal communities. There's also domestic content. And then, of course, we just discussed direct pay. And you can see, again, a list of eligible types of projects here. And if you're interested in learning more about this, we can connect you with Lawyers for Good Governance, who are doing, I believe, free consulting for people to learn more about the eligibility of various projects for direct pay. So I'll just leave it at that. And I know we have a lot of knowledge in our council on this topic, so we would love to have a conversation with you and get your input. And if you have questions about federal funding opportunities in this area, I can either answer those or find the best person to do so.
Thank you, Kayla. So open to questions.
I have a question that I'll ask. Regarding the federal funding opportunities and some of the way they're stacked here, couple of points is NMEDD posting those on their website or getting them out there, or is it up to us to go to the agencies?
So we're actually in the process of compiling a list of state and federal incentives for every target sector. So we recently convened an event with MNERD and DFA in the governor's office where we talked with government stakeholders specifically about federal funding opportunities. And we came out of that with a really nice list of New Mexico specific tax incentives. And then we worked with external partners as well from organizations like the Rocky Mountain Institute and the State Support Center to compile that federal list. And then we're also doing that for each target sector. So those will be available in the plan as well as on our website once we have them compiled.
That's great. Good.
And we should note too that there are some great new incentives for geothermal from the last session. Very important to mention.
That's good to know. Good. Thank you.
And Kayla, can you promote Atza Chavez to a panelist? I know that she joined just a little late. She was here after Sammy's presentation.
Should be going now.
Sure. And also open to any questions or comments from folks in the audience, I guess is what. Great. I had a question around transmission, but it was more directed towards Sammy, but also I'll follow up with her. But I think just really thinking through how do we continue to safeguard public lands, engage in meaningful tribal consultation and potential co-benefits for tribal communities and for communities in general. But I will follow up with Sammy.
And it looks like she might have had to drop off too.
It's fine. Yes, she did.
And these comments don't have to be a response to our presentations. If you have things that you're working on, we would love to hear about those too.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Kayla, can you maybe talk a little bit more, and this is, I know, going into our next topic, but we can also continue this conversation if folks have questions. But how are you incorporating some of this into the state economic plan as we update it?
Yeah, so we have a section devoted to harnessing federal investments in clean energy and infrastructure, because as I said, that's the only EDD in New Mexico state target sector that is heavily subsidized at the federal level right now. And again, it's not just competitive grants, but a lot of these pots of funding in terms of loans that are available and the tax incentives, those are kind of going to keep churning around in the economy. So we're excited about them because it's not a one-time competitive grant, even though those can be great. And we have kind of 10 years of running room with the direct pay tax credits. So we want to use the plan and future events that we might host to conduct education about those federal opportunities. And so, yeah, we will have discussion of other target sectors, but there's partly a focus on ensuring that we harness these federal funding opportunities for renewable energy.
You, and I also see Marissa joined, so welcome Marissa and Ata. But yes, also opportunity for folks to highlight any projects that you may be working on in the renewable energy field. Oh, Patricia?
So kind of jumping back a couple of lines, James, if you had questions about transmission lines, it's kind of shocking to me that that number of big giant lines is what we need and are doing. I don't know anything about it. It's just not my area. Is that a fact that for any of the stuff that we generate, those monstrous lines are essential to moving it out and getting a return on that energy? Is that what those are for? Those big monsters are to just move the electricity out?
Really good question, and it's beyond my expertise as well.
So, Patricia, I think the high voltage lines, and I know we have several folks here who might have good answers to this too, but I believe those are for transporting large quantities of energy more quickly. So kind of, to be able to, for example, if New Mexico wants to produce energy for other places, and if we really want energy to be able to be shared between regions, that's a big deal. But there are also, transmission and siting and all those things are super complicated. And, there are things that can be done by retrofits to existing lines, for example, that can increase their efficiency. And so I think because the grid is so piecemeal and hodgepodge, it's going to end up being a mixture, and not just technically, but politically as well. There are so many barriers to getting these big projects done that I think it'll kind of be a mixture of adding new infrastructure, modernizing, retrofitting, and updating.
Yeah, I hear a lot nowadays, and it probably was a question for Sammy, but since we were sort of at a break and James said transmission, I was like, oh, I had that question, and I felt kind of embarrassed to ask because I just flat didn't realize that. And but we hear a lot about microgrids and more localized, little more addressable to smaller regions, and that could be a great thing. But to tie that point to something else I saw on an early slide, on your slides about our economy, the one where you had all the bars. And, we in this research tech transfer business, we always believe manufacturing is the goal because that's how you scale a technology. You get it. We can do all the development we want in New Mexico, and we do a lot of it. We research and develop, but to really get that return, you've got to manufacture. But we're doing more in energy transmission, and maybe that is analogous to manufacturing from the energy standpoint. And certainly then it sounds as if transmission lines are the way to get that out and scale.
Yeah, and there's still a whole economy across the supply chain where manufacturing is an important part of that. And then I think the main thing with massive lines like that is that, energy can be exported to large consumer bases, which is something very different than we have lots of different opportunities and needs here. And I think it's also important to distinguish a lot of people in community settings still need energy access as opposed to kind of producing energy for market or, so, and both are great opportunities. But so in terms of, small scale and community solar, and we have some experts on that here, that's an amazing opportunity that there is also funding for through IRA specifically, and BIL, and the state got $156 million for Solar for All. So that's an exciting opportunity for residential and community scale solar. And then
Yeah.
some of these larger projects, yes, there is huge potential to do utility scale projects and harness funding, you know, through the DOE's loan programs office and things like that. And so for their state energy financing institutions, they're seeking projects or aggregates of projects with $100 million minimum. So those are definitely large, not that we can't bundle smaller projects like solar on schools, but they are definitely looking for larger players as opposed to other opportunities like Solar for All can really be geared towards community solar. And I think we're all anxiously awaiting to hear more information about Solar for All from MNERD. So that'll be
Yeah, that'll be a fun thing to learn about. Cool, thank you. Yeah, I just couldn't get my arms around those monstrous trends, and it just seems like there's going to be more and more. But in and of themselves, they generate, you know, I mean, there's an environmental impact to just making it, not just having it. So, yeah.
Yeah, and I'll note that Pam was good enough to put in the Q&A new guidelines from the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission on tribal engagement and participation on issues like transmission and natural gas development, which we certainly could have an entire conversation about. So any other questions or comments on either of the presentations? Great. Well, then we will move on. And Kayla, I'll turn it to you again around updates on the state plan and participation.
Yep, so we just got back from Farmington this morning. We had a great set of sessions yesterday with coal workers from the generating station and mine, and it was a little fresh for everybody because the demolition happened over the weekend. But we had some great conversations there. And then this morning we were meeting with folks who are leaders in the community, elected officials, members of civil society, and having a conversation about anything from housing to homelessness in the aftermath of the closure. So we've been on the road to host different events like this. We've had a little bit of interest in our tribal economic development focus group offering. So we're excited to carry forward a few of those with the leaders who have expressed interest. And then we're working with our community and tribal engagement working groups from within our advisory council just to develop things like surveys. Daisy and I are working on a Colonia survey, and anyone else who's interested in doing something like that can feel free to reach out. But so it's all ongoing and kind of directly contributing to how we think about the plan. And we've been really pleased with the feedback that we're receiving.
Kayla, and maybe you could, I know this might come in the next section around reports from the working groups, but since you mentioned the community engagement survey that you're working with Daisy Maldonado on, can you describe what that looks like, just to give others a sense of what is possible?
Yes, so we have a small contract intergovernmental agreement with the Center for Social Policy at UNM. Dr. Sanchez is working with us, and so they have platforms where they can create surveys very easily and distribute them. And so Daisy has kind of just floated some topics that are of interest to survey her community about. And then I believe there's potentially budget we can set aside for small payments to folks who complete the survey. It would be very modest, but certainly better than nothing.
Great. Thanks, Kayla. Joe, you have your hand up.
Yeah, sorry, my camera's not working, so I'll have to stay unclothed or whatever. Anyway, I just want to follow up on Kayla's. I was at a committee hearing in Farmington last week State Economic Development Committee, interim committee. And they had a really good presentation from the mayor and their economic development office explaining how they're recreating their economic base with a loss of energy development in that area. And they're kind of centering more around the Four Corners and bringing people in for recreational type situations. So they're building out trails or building out bike routes, looking at kayaking, a bunch of other stuff. And they're trying to look in, they know it's not going to make as much money as they did under the energy end of it, but they are looking at how to supplement that and bring more people into that area. So they've got issues of housing, of course, and a bunch of others, but it's a really good report. And I think it's really interesting to see a whole region already trying to retool itself. And they started this a couple of years ago, retooling itself to come up with other ways of making money other than through the, directly through the energy component. So I think it's an interesting review. If we could talk to them at a later date, they've got some plans, long range plans, and they produced a really good report. And it's similar to what Las Cruces is going through right now as well. We've been meeting with them, and they're trying to expand tourism and that kind of a local input again, though they're not energy dependent, but it's just another source of seeing how a whole community comes together to actually have a plan and actually have kind of watching them implement it as they go, showing results and the next steps they're looking at. So I think at some point would really fit in well with what we're trying to do here, in terms of what are the alternatives. And if you do come up with alternatives, how do you go about actually making a plan and moving them forward? Takes a lot of commitment on their part, that's for sure. Thank you.
Thanks, Joe. Well, if anything occurs to folks, please feel free to communicate that. And I think we can go ahead and move on to the working group updates, if there are any.
Yeah, so not much to report. We had the letter that went out to tribal government leaders, and we've had a few responses of interest, but we obviously haven't hosted anything yet, so we're still kind of working on dates with those that expressed interest. And in terms of other community engagement, like I said, we've been on the road and having some good conversations across the state. And, more generally, we have our online forum. We did a press release. There were some news pieces about it. So I've been getting lots and lots and lots of comments, which is good, and still interested in anything that this council might want to contribute to all of that. But as far as our working groups, I think I got some good input, and we're kind of basically carrying out that model right now. So we'll be in touch as soon as we have updates.
Great, thanks, Kayla, and thank you to council members that have assisted, especially on the tribal engagement front. And Daisy is not here, but appreciate her continuing to do community outreach. Then we can move on to the next item, which I think is any additional reports from you, Kayla.
No, I think I covered everything, so we're probably good.
Great, thank you. We'll move on to any public comment. So if anyone in the audience has something they want to raise, please raise your hand or make yourself known. Okay, hearing and seeing none, I think we are at the end of our meeting for today, and we'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
Jonathan, a motion.
Thank you.
Second that motion.
Thank you, Wendy. All in favor? Aye.
Hi.
Aye.
Excellent. Well, thank you all for attending today, and look forward to seeing you this coming month. And we are adjourned.
Thanks, James.